වීව එකතුණු උකුතේ එකක
රස උපරිමයි.
හරිම සුළුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Friday the 3rd of February 2023. Counter response. China responds to US Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland's calls for the United States to do something to help Sri Lanka instead of pointing fingers at China. Readiness. Sri Lankan bondholders inform IMF of readiness to engage with Sri Lankan authorities to get debt relief. Denied. Supreme Court rejects HRCSL's request to not have power cuts until the A-level exam is concluded.
උසස් පෙළට පසු කොලිෆයි වෙමු ඉහළට යමු ජය අරගමු ප්‍රොමෝෂන් එකට ඊළඟ දාගත්තොත් ඩිග්‍රිය ගොඩ
ජාතික වැවිලි කළමනාකරන ආයතනය NIPM වෙතින් රාජ්‍ය වගකීම සහ ලෝපිළිගත් උපාධියක් තරුණ ඔබට Be smart, be qualified, be recognized with NIPM ජාතික වැවිලි සරසවිය.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9 with Andrew Bernard. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
A very good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. In your top story for tonight, China now called on the United States of America to actually do something to help Sri Lanka rather than jab fingers at China's close cooperation with Sri Lanka. The comments were made by the spokesperson of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs in response to the comments made by the US Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland during a visit to Sri Lanka. During a media briefing, she went on to say that China had offered not enough in terms of Sri Lanka's debt restructuring.
Sri Lanka has been in consultation with its bilateral and multilateral creditors in September 2022 after the IMF agreed to provide Sri Lanka with $2.9 billion under the IMF facility to get creditor reassurances. However, the results of this activity had only been materialized towards the end of last month when Sri Lanka's largest bilateral creditors, India and China, provided the IMF with the assurances regarding their willingness to restructure Sri Lanka's debt. International media further reported yesterday that the Paris Club would provide the global lender with their assurances soon as well. In this backdrop, US Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs Victoria Nuland during a media briefing yesterday stated that the assurances provided by China was not enough.
What China has offered so far is not enough. We need to see credible and specific assurances that they will meet the IMF standard of debt relief.
Meanwhile, the Chinese Minister of Foreign Affairs responded to a question raised by a journalist yesterday on the US Undersecretary's remarks, saying the US side does not reflect the truth. Spokesperson for the Chinese ministry, Mao Ning, said the Export-Import Bank of China has already provided Sri Lanka with a letter to express support for its debt sustainability. She went on to say that Sri Lanka has responded positively and thanked China for it. The spokesperson added that the US might as well show some sincerity and actually do something to help Sri Lanka weather through the current difficulties rather than jabbing fingers at China's close cooperation with Sri Lanka. She stated that as a friendly neighbor and a true friend, China has been closely following the difficulties and challenges facing Sri Lanka and providing assistance for its economic and social development to the best of their capabilities. As to Sri Lanka's debt to the Chinese side, the spokesperson said that China supports Chinese financial institutions in having consultations with Sri Lanka to seek a proper settlement. China stands ready to work with relevant countries and international financial institutions and continue to play a positive role in helping Sri Lanka navigate the situation, easing its debt burden and helping it achieve sustainable development.
Now, the ad hoc group of Sri Lankan bondholders have informed the International Monetary Fund of their readiness to engage with Sri Lankan officials to help Sri Lanka make progress with regard to the $2.9 billion program with the IMF. This comes a day after the international media reported that the Paris Club member countries have also agreed to soon provide the IMF with the debt assurances that Sri Lanka is looking forward to.
Sri Lanka's bondholders have told the International Monetary Fund through a letter that they stand ready to quickly come to a common consensus with Sri Lankan authorities through its steering committee on terms that could help the country move forward with the IMF program. The letter went on to say that they stand ready to engage quickly and effectively with the Sri Lankan authorities to design and implement restructuring terms that would help Sri Lanka restore debt sustainability and allow the country to regain access to the international capital markets during the IMF program period. It further read that the bondholder group thereby confirms it is prepared to engage through its steering committee with the Sri Lankan authorities in restructuring negotiations consistent with the parameters of the IMF program and the targets specified therein. Sri Lanka's bondholders, who identified themselves as the ad hoc group of Sri Lanka bondholders, acknowledged the engagement of Sri Lankan authorities with the official creditors towards the resolution of the current crisis and restoration of debt sustainability. They acknowledged that such an engagement had resulted in India providing the IMF with a letter of assurances regarding debt restructuring and remaining committed to restoring debt sustainability in Sri Lanka.
Now, the Supreme Court denied the petition filed by the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka seeking an interim order preventing the Ceylon Electricity Board from imposing power cuts during the duration of the advanced level examination. The petition will be taken up for consideration once again on the 7th of this month.
The Supreme Court announced today that it had rejected the request made by the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka to issue an interim order preventing the Ceylon Electricity Board from imposing power cuts during the ongoing 2022 GCE Advanced Level Examination. The announcement was made by a three-member judge bench comprising of Gamini Amarasekara, Kumudini Vikramasinghe and Shiran Gunaratne. President's Counsel Upul Jayasuriya, who appeared on behalf of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, requested the court to extend the undertaking that was made by the Ceylon Electricity Board yesterday to not disrupt the power supply today. However, President's Counsel Romesh De Silva objected against this proposal on behalf of the CEB. Judge Gamini Amarasekara, who examined the case, said the pledge was only made until the petition was taken up for consideration today. As such, the three-member judge bench stated that they rejected the petition filed by the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka to issue an interim order to prevent power cuts during the period of the advanced level examination. Further consideration of the petition was adjourned till the 7th of this month. In the meantime, the CEB has requested permission from the Public Utilities Commission to disrupt the power supply for 2 hours and 20 minutes from Monday onwards.
Now, the Minister of Power and Energy, Minister of Environment Nazir Ahmed states that the measures such as increasing taxes are needed by the country as it faces its worst economic crisis, although such measures might not be popular. He made these remarks at the press conference following a discussion with the Commonwealth Secretary-General Patricia Scotland.
The Commonwealth Secretary-General Patricia Scotland met with the Minister of Environment Nazir Ahmed today at the ministry premises. The Secretary-General held discussions with Sri Lankan officials on several issues pertaining to the environment and assured continued support.
Commonwealth Secretary-General had visited today, and we had extensive discussion on mangrove plantation as well as the other projects that they have been assisting Sri Lanka. Also the plastic management system that also been discussed. She had agreed to support Sri Lanka in many other areas.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Environment Nasir Ahmed also responded to questions by the media on the upcoming local government election.
ඒකට සමහරවිට මේ වගේ ප්‍රශ්න වලට මූණ දීලා තමයි අපිට එළියට යන්න පුළුවන්. කැමැත්තෙන් කරන්න වැඩක් නැහැ. නමුත් මේක කරන්න අපිට සිද්ධ වෙනවා. ඔයගොල්ලන් දන්නවා මුළු ලෝකයෙන් ගත්තොත් කොයිවත් නැහැ බලන්න බෑ මේ වගේ ෆ්‍රී සිස්ටම්. এডুকেෂන් ගත්තොත් මේ ඉලෙක්ට්‍රිසිටි, හෙල්ත් මෙච්චර කාලා අපි ලකි වුණා. නමුත් දැන් වෙටිලා තියෙන වෙලාව අපි ආර්ථික ගොඩ ගන්න ඕන නම් මේ වගේ සිස්ටම් වලට යන්න අපිට සිද්ධ වෙනවා.
Now, the leader of the Jatika Janabalawege, Anurakkumara Dissanayake, states that the addresses the current issues of the country, a government needs to be formed which has the trust of all the racial communities. He made these remarks in Sainthamaruthu recently.
The Jatika Janabalawege held a meeting under the theme "The Compass is the Solution" in Sainthamaruthu recently. Speaking at the event, the leader of the Jatika Janabalawege, Anurakkumara Dissanayake, highlighted the importance of forming a government that has the trust of all racial communities.
සම්පූර්ණ කඩා වැටලා තියෙන්නේ. ලංකාව පිටරටින් ණය අරගෙන ගෙවා ගන්න බැරි තත්ත්වයක් ඇති වී තිබෙනවා. ලයිට් බිල වැඩි වුණා, බදු ගාහන එක වැඩි වුණා, ඉස්පිරිතාලේ අත්‍යවශ්‍ය බෙහෙත් ටිකක් නැහැ. කුඹුරු වලට ගහන්න පොහොර ටික නැතුව ගියා. ගොවියන් මුළුමනින්ම විනාශයටපත් වුණා. ඒ නිසා මුළු රටම විනාශ කළා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා දැන් තමුන්නාන්සලාට හිතෙන්නේ නැද්ද? මෙතර කාලයක් අතර කාලා හදාගත්තු ආණ්ඩු තමුන්නාන්සලාට ප්‍රශ්න නොවිසඳු බව. මහින්දලා රනිල්ලා කරේ මොකද්ද? ඒගොල්ලගේ ප්‍රශ්න විසඳ ගන්නවා. අපේ රටේ ආණ්ඩුවක් හැදුනේ නැහැ. ජනතාවගේ ප්‍රශ්න විසඳන. මේ සැර එක සැරයක් ආණ්ඩුවක් හදමු. ජනතාවගේ ප්‍රශ්න විසඳන. මාලිමාවේ අපි ආණ්ඩු බලය ඉල්ලන්නේ අපිට හම්බ කරගන්න නෙමෙයි. අපි මේ දේශපාලනයට ආවේ අපි ඇස් ඉදිරිපිට මිනිස්සු විඳින දුක අපි දකිනවා. නැගෙනහිර ජනතාවටත් ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ. දකුණු ජනතාවටත් ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ. උතුරු ජනතාවටත් ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ. එහෙනම් අපි ඔක්කොම එකතු වෙලා ආණ්ඩුවක් හදමු. දකුණ ගත්තොත් මේ ඡන්දෙදී සියලුම වාර්තා ඉදිරිපත් කළා තියෙන්නේ උඩින් ඉන්නේ මාලිමාව. දකුණෙන් විතරක් බලය අරගෙන මදි. අපිට ඕන බෙදුණු ආණ්ඩුවක් නෙවෙයි. සිංහල දෙමළ මුස්ලිම් සියලු ජනතාව විශ්වාස කරන ආණ්ඩුවක් හදන්න ඕන. අන්න ඒක තමයි මාලිමාවට ඡන්දෙ දෙන්න. අපි හදනවා තමුන්නාන්සලට ආදායම් සහිත ආර්ථිකය දියුණු කරන රටක්. පටන් ගන්න කොතනින්ද? අපේ රටේ හොරකම නතර කරනවා.
Now, the leader of the opposition, Sajid Premadasa, states that the party, the Samgi Janabalawege, will not agree to a deal with the IMF, placing a high tax burden on Sri Lankans. He made these remarks addressing a political rally in Dambulla yesterday. A Samgi Janabalawege political rally under the theme Answers to a Country with No Answers was held yesterday in Dambulla under the patronage of party leader Sajid Premadasa. Speaking at the rally, he stated that his party does not support an IMF deal that places too much of a tax burden on the people.
හොඳින් හිටපු ගොවි ජනතාව විනාශ කරේ රාජපක්ෂ හොර හැටි කරේ කියන එක ඔබ සියලු දෙනාම පිළිගන්නවා. අපි අනිවාර්යෙන්ම ඔවිතනේ නියැලෙන ජනතාව නවීන තාක්ෂණයෙන් ශක්තිමත් කරලා රටේ ආහාර නිෂ්පාදනය ඉහළ මට්ටමට ගෙනවිල්ලා රටේ ජාතික ආහාර සුරක්ෂිතභාවය තහවුරු කරන්නට අපි අනිවාර්යෙන්ම කටයුතු කරනවා. සමගි ජන බලවේගය කියන්නේ UNP නෙවෙයි. UNP ඉවරයි. හොඳට මතක තියාගන්න. මුළු රටටම ඇහෙන්න කියන්නේ. රට කොට දාන්න. අපිට සිද්ධ වෙනවා IMF එකත් එක්ක ගනුදෙනු කරන්න. හැබැයි බදු බර පටවන මිනිස්සුන්ගේ ජන ජීවිත විනාශ කරන IMF ඩීල් වලට සමගි ජන බලවේගය නැත. ඒ නිසා මිත්‍රවරුනි IMF එකත් එක්ක හරියට ගනුදෙනු කරන්න පුළුවන්. IMF අරමුදල් ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන්. එකම පක්ෂය සමගි ජන බලවේගය කියන එක මම මේ අවස්ථාවේ ප්‍රකාශ කරනවා.
Welcome back. The former Archbishop of Colombo, His Grace Most Reverend Dr. Oswald Gomes, was called to eternal rest earlier today. Throughout his career, His Grace, the forever Archbishop of Colombo, held numerous prestigious positions and engaged in many philanthropic activities.
Born in Calania on the 12th of December 1932, former Archbishop of Colombo Dr. Oswald Gomes received his education from St. Benedict's College, Colombo and St. Paul's College in Varagoda. He completed his theological studies at the National Seminary in Kandy and was ordained as a priest at St. Lucius Cathedral, Cartagena on the 3rd of February 1958 by the then Archbishop, His Eminence Thomas Cardinal Curé. Later on in 1968, he received episcopal ordination as the Auxiliary Bishop of Colombo. Throughout his career, His Grace held numerous prestigious positions including Auxiliary Bishop of Colombo, Bishop of Anuradhapura and Archbishop of Colombo. In 2001, he was appointed Chancellor of the Archdiocese, a role he held with distinction until his retirement in 2021, where he was conferred the title of Emeritus Archbishop. The Most Reverend Dr. Oswald Gomes was instrumental in founding a number of schools and colleges in the country. He also spearheaded the program for construction of houses for tsunami victims and supplying livelihood.
In your business news, the indices on the stock exchange closed in green today as a result of price gains in counters such as Commercial Bank, Sampath Bank and Hatton National Bank, with the turnover crossing 4.1 billion rupees. The SPI gained 1.73% to stand at 9,178.61, while the S&P SL20 gained 1.81% to stand at 2,863.64. Crossings were witnessed in Nations Trust Bank, John Keel's Holding, Dialogue Oxiata, TJ Lanka and Lankim Ceylon, accounting for 41.6% of the turnover. Mixed interest was observed in Aitken Spence, Expo Lanka Holdings and Lanka IOC, while the retail interest was noted in Softlogic Capital, Browns Investments and LOLC Finance. Furthermore, foreigners closed as net buyers today. During the week, the ASPI and the S&P SL20 gained 2.5% and 1.7% respectively, whilst recording a daily average turnover of 2.18 billion rupees. The banking sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, whilst the sector index gained 5.7%. The capital goods sector, in the meantime, was the second highest contributor to the market turnover, as the sector index increased by 1.18%. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee fared against other major currencies in the world. Now, oil prices eased today with major benchmarks headed for their second straight week of losses as the market awaited further signs of fuel demand recovery in China to offset looming slumps in other major economies. Meanwhile, the EV's ban on the Russian refined products is also scheduled to come into effect from the 5th of February onwards. Now, Brent crude futures fell 0.4% to $81.83 a barrel, while US West Texas Intermediate crude futures slid 0.5% to $75.51. Both contracts have dropped by more than 5% so far this week, with mixed signals on fuel demand recovery in China, the world's top oil importer, keeping a lid on prices. Analysts pointed to a sharp jump in traffic in China's 15 largest cities following the Lunar New Year holiday, but also noted that Chinese traders had been relatively absent. The prospect of an economic rebound in China after COVID-19 curbs eased has buoyed the oil market so far this year, along with a weaker dollar that makes the commodity cheaper for those holding other currencies. The dollar has fallen because aggressive interest rate hikes by the US Federal Reserve are no longer expected. The US Central Bank scaled back to a milder rate increase after a year of larger hikes, but policymakers also projected that ongoing increases in borrowing costs would be needed. Upcoming interest rate hikes in 2023 are likely to weigh on the US and European economies, boosting fears of an economic slowdown, highly likely to dent global crude oil demand. Investors are also eyeing developments on the 5th of February for the European ban on Russian refined products. Now, a global stock rally ran into resistance in Asia today as disappointing earnings from US tech giants undermined sentiment. The dollar regained some of the rooting ahead of a key decision from US non-payroll report. European markets are set to extend the caution with pan-region Euro Stoxx 50 futures down 0.1%, German DAX futures falling 0.2%, and FTSE futures mostly flat. Overnight, markets took a dovish view of rate guidance from the European Central Bank and the Bank of England, hoping that an end of the massive global tightening cycle is in sight, pushing local bonds higher and the currencies lower. Meanwhile, in Asia today, MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan is 0.6%, dragged down by a 1.3% slump in Chinese blue chips and a 1.4% tumble in Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index. Investors are waiting to see more tangible signs of an economic recovery in China after Beijing dropped nearly all its COVID curbs in December, sparking a surge in foreign inflows. Other regional markets eked out of modest gains. Japan's Nikkei rose 0.3%, Australia's resources heavy shares rallied 0.6%, while South Korea's Kospi climbed 0.5%. Investors are also watching the fallout from this week's plunge in shares of India's Adani Group, which continued to fall today, with market losses amounting to $115 billion in the wake of a US short sellers report. And that's all the news we have for this evening. Join us again tomorrow for the very latest news at the very same time. Tune into our social media pages for the latest news. Have a pleasant evening and good night.
For news and information you can trust 24 hours a day, visit AdaDerana.lk.